You think the mass market novel is bad?
Well, it's just crowded. Oh, here it is.
But then, like, your counterexample is Street Journalist, which also has, like, almost no margin.
Right, but there's a lot more space between the lines.
Oh. I don't see why that's important.
Okay, well.
That's a pretty
Yeah, that's
heavy...
a deeply produced book.
I think this is a really good example, actually.
Okay. We don't always have to agree. Welcome back to episode 33 of A People's Guide to Publishing. I am your host, Joe Beal, the autistic publisher.
I'm Ellie Blue, the editor who doesn't care about grammar. That's my new tagline.
And this week, we are going to talk about the elusive science and art of production.
So, Joe, can you tell us what production is?
Production is everything from the point that the editor is done with the book. So you have the finished text, and you have a list of all of the other things that go in the book, like illustrations, photographs, maps, charts, colors. You have an idea of like what the budget is for the book. It's getting the printing quotes to know, exactly that this is, how to set this up, like what the spine bulk is, which is like how thick the book is. And it's making that work in a series of, today, digital files that allow the book produced to look like the book intended.
The job of production is everything from when the editor is done with it to when the book comes back from the printer.
That's correct, yeah. And so it's
this is your job at our company.
Overseeing that, and it's even communicating it to the printer and then making sure that the printer's proof matches what your idea of the book's appearance is. And so that is part of it, as well as things like typesetting, which is, making the type look nice in the book.
There are a lot of very technical parts to production, and I feel like we could do a whole episode on each one, honestly. But then there's also a lot of YouTube videos out there that you can learn to train how a beginning publisher might set about being like, okay, I know all the things I need to know about writing this book and editing it. How do I get this into a book-shaped object?
Production is kind of seen as a necessary evil in publishing, so it's not seen as like a passion area. So if you are one of those people, you would probably want to either hire a professional to do it for you, and there's many people that are willing to do that for you. If this is an area of interest for you that you feel like you could be excited about, I would start with like watching a YouTube video on typography or getting a book out of the library. So one on basic design theory, and then one on sort of like the more technical production aspects, like dots per inch, when you're making images and sizing them and formatting them, and what makes a photo look good in print versus what makes a photo look good on the internet, and sort of mapping out how to achieve the results that you're looking for.
And then, like, also be very aware, both when you're doing it yourself and when you're hiring someone, that doing this stuff for digital and the internet is very different than doing it for print. Like, you're doing different kinds of files. Sometimes you need totally different assets. Like, you need low resolution for the internet, high resolution for print. There's a lot of differences there to kind of always keep on the top of your mind.
Production does include the coding ebooks.
Mm-hmm. Which is also very difficult, we've learned.
And a whole nother complicated, like, if you have somebody that is skilled, they can do those two things, development for print and development for digital book, simultaneously. But most of the time you will need to sort of like revisit that a bit.
So what I did when I ran my own company was the first time I published anything, I outsourced all of the production. A friend did it for me. And then as I put out more and more things, I would like try to kind of add a new skill each time. And then by the time I got to like, I would say 5 or 6 zines or books in, I was able to do all the things myself. And then by the time I got to 7 or 8 books in, I was able to realize that even though I could do all the things myself, there were some things like cover design that it was really worth it to have somebody else do who was more skilled at it, because that's such a important skill. But especially with the typesetting, I think you can totally do it yourself. And for myself, when I'm reading a book, like, it doesn't usually really bother me, even if there's very crowded typesetting or even if the typesetting is not great. But I know for a lot of people, like, that experience is important to them. But I would say, like, that is an area where you don't necessarily need to, like, have a huge understanding of it to do an adequate job. Whereas, like, things like pre-pressing photos and making sure like your photographs and illustrations are in a format that will actually print is essential if you want those to actually be seen on the page.
Because the biggest problem with photographs printed in a book is that they are sort of a gray blob, and they don't have tone and contrast, or the shadows overbear the highlights of the photo. And so in a good photo, you can see like what is intended in the photo. Let me show you one that is not across a 2-page spread in multiple color sets. Like this photo has definition, and you can see what's going on. Whereas if it's a bad photo, it'll just your eyes will it'll take longer to just adjust to it.
But like I would say the worst case scenario is not even that your photo isn't very well developed. The worst case scenario is that your photo literally does not show up in the book and you have a blank spot there where you intended there to be a photo.
Or,
I learned this editing my college newspaper.
Gotcha, yes.
Or you have like a rasterized version of some ad that then you don't get the ad payment for.
That is a common problem too, where if you use low resolution files, they will print blurry.
And your printer should flag these for you if you're working with a real book manufacturer, but it's also like really expensive for the printer to discover this problem. You will save a lot of money, time, and your adrenal glands if you are able to set up all of your production technically correctly before it goes to print.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to briefly discuss typesetting. So in this book, which I would not recommend that you read, you can see the type is pretty large on the page. Like it's not, it feels like it's padding a lack of content.
And the font choices, oof.
And yeah, and it's like you have a very serifed font, and then you have a really jokey kind of font head. Whereas this book, which I honestly also would recommend that you not read, is it's better. It has like some space between lines, like that's called leading, and there's a comfortable amount of characters per line and space between letters or characters. That's called kerning. And they use a serif font and a sans title. It's not hard on the eyes. Whereas this book, which would probably be my highest recommendation to read of the three,
I found it very readable.
You can see there's a lot of type crowded on the page. It's sort of the opposite of the first book. There's not a lot of margins to put your fingers. It's like they probably used automated typesetting to place everything and to go from there. And that is not abnormal for a book like this, a mass market book. This is one of our books which I would highly recommend that you purchase and read. And you can see there's like a space between lines. It's like comfortable on the line. There's a lot of photos throughout this book. It's just it's like a very intensive production project.
Right, and I would say like when you're just getting started out publishing, like the more elements that you have in a book, the more difficult it will be, and not just in terms of like the technical production, but also like making sure the photo is on the right page. Mm-hmm. Like if you realize after you've done the whole layout that you have to move one photo 3 pages, that could cause you to have to do the whole layout again. Like this is, all too real. So the stakes of production are a little bit high in your company. We suggest you take it seriously, but we also suggest
do what you feel.
You don't have to do it yourself, and if you do parts of it yourself, you could enjoy it, and it could make your books look so cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been episode 33 of A People's Guide to Publishing. I am your host, Joe Beal, the Autistic Publisher.
I'm Ellie Blue.
And we'll see you next time.
You can find us on the internet at microcosmpublishing.com or microcosm.pub if you want to keep it short and simple. You can also find us on Twitter at Microcosm, on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing, on Instagram at microcosm_pub, and here in Portland on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.